Mysterious cattle mutilations have been occurring across the entire United States for decades at this point. These mutilations have stumped law enforcement, scientists, and even experienced cattle ranchers that don't know what's happening to these livestock. The purpose of this video is to go over the history of these cattle mutilations, as well as look at a couple articles and documentaries that were created discussing these mysterious cattle deaths. I'm also going to harp back to an article made by Distinctly Montana that covers the Montana side of these cattle mutilations. There are a lot of supposed explanations to these cattle deaths, ranging from cults to lightning strikes, even going as far as saying that aliens are coming down and harvesting these cattle. Before an alien comes down and harvests your organs, I wanted to say thank you for watching this episode of Montana After Midnight. On this channel, I talk about all things mysterious, paranormal, and creepy to do with the big sky state of Montana. This is like the 5th episode that I've made, so make sure to check out some of my other content after you subscribe to the channel. Anyway, let's get into these mysterious cattle mutilations. Before we talk about how these cattle mutilations affected the state of Montana and some of those specific cases, I wanted to go over the general history of these cattle mutilations. So you might be asking yourself, what do these cattle mutilations actually look like? What takes a natural death of a cow and elevates it to a mysterious, supernatural cattle mutilation? Well, these specific cases had to deal with inner organs and things like their tongues, eyes, udders being removed, and not removed in a normal way, but instead being surgically removed, or at least seemingly surgically removed. These cuts were fine and hard to replicate / understand. Another factor that played into these mysterious cattle deaths was the fact that some of them would be completely drained of their blood. The surrounding area would have no trace of predators' footsteps, scavengers' footsteps, or even human footsteps. Also, some of the time there would be a circular ring found near the corpse. This is either like surrounding it or just in the local vicinity of the corpse. The cattle would be found dead with things like their eyes, ears, tongue missing, as well as internal soft organs. Alongside this, it would seem that there would be a fine surgical cut that ripped these organs out, not the typical cut or wound that you would see from a scavenger or a predator. These cattle mutilations have been around since the 1700s, and it goes all the way up until the modern day, but the peak of activity for these cattle mutilations happened in the 1970s, and that's when this phenomenon was the most popular. Speaking of the 1970s, in 1975, over 200 cattle mutilations were reported from October to April alone in the state of Colorado. This was a huge growing issue in the United States because millions of dollars were being lost in livestock because of these random, unexplainable cow deaths. It was such an issue that the Federal Bureau of Investigations, yes, the FBI, had to get involved and do some research / an investigation into these cattle mutilations. They started the research in 1979, and by 1980 they decided that no suspicious or supernatural entity was at play, and these cattle mutilations were just par for the course. Nothing unusual was occurring. Specifically, they stated, none of the reported cases had involved what appeared to be mutilations by anything other than common predators. While the FBI concluded that nothing out of the ordinary was occurring with these animal deaths, the locals and ranchers were in very much disagreement. While the FBI said that, nothing weird is going on, I do kind of partially side with the local / ranchers, because if a generational rancher, someone that's been doing it for 50 years and, their grandparents did it, they've inherited their cattle ranch, says that an animal died and they can't really explain why, I am leaning towards, all right, there should be some more investigations done. I'm a little bit more skeptical than that, but just In this case, with experienced cattle ranchers being like, hey, something weird is going on, I kind of want to listen to them and see what they have to say. So I feel like the FBI's conclusion that took them about a year to come to 1979 to 1980 was a little convenient, and just saying that, oh, local predators are what's causing these weird mutilations was almost too easy of an answer. But this is definitely where the divide in the topic of these cattle mutilations comes from. So there's those two camps. The science can explain this, nothing weird's happening. And then the other camp saying that, hey, we know what normally happens to these cattle when they die. Something weird is afoot here that isn't explainable by science, and it is definitely out of the ordinary. Now, taking the camp of people that are saying something odd is happening here, there are a couple of prevailing theories as to what the heck is going on, all of them being a little bit more fantastical than just a predator or scavengers coming out and messing with these dead cattle. One of the top theories, and a theory that was actually investigated by law enforcement, was the fact that cults, specifically satanic cults, could be coming in and harvesting these cattle for their organs to do crazy blood satanic rituals. There's two law enforcement agencies, one in Iowa and one in Canada, that launched serious investigations into these cult-like attacks of cattle. This specifically explains why some of the cattle have these super precise surgical cuts in them that a normal predator can't make, because a person is coming in and harvesting specific organs like the heart or sex organs or cow udders for these specific satanic rituals. Now, while there was some government and law enforcement agencies looking into these cattle deaths, there was also the light turned on to the government with these mysterious helicopters that were flying over cattle nights and days before the weird deaths occurred. This led some people to believe that the government was doing some illegal testing on cattle. Specifically, some biowarfare/biological weapons were being produced and tested on these livestock. I'm not too sure how I feel about this one. I'm not fully convinced that the government is testing our livestock, our cattle, by using biological weapons on them. Um, but some people do believe that, and it is an option. The history article in which I'm getting all this information from then lists Skinwalker Ranch in Utah and talks about how some of their cattle in their herd also died from mysterious causes in the 1970s. What makes Skinwalker Ranch story a little bit more unique is that instead of government agencies or cults, people were reporting mysterious, unexplainable beast-like creatures coming in and messing with the herds, causing some of these cattle deaths that can't normally be explained. Some of the beasts were described as wolves that were 3 times the size of a normal wolf, as well as a humanoid creature that had bright yellow eyes found lurking near the herd of cattle. But that is Skinwalker Ranch, so I kind of feel like it just makes more sense that there be a cryptid/beast explanation to what the heck is happening with these cattle. I'm also going to take a moment to put the mic down, and I'm going to show you my board. It's been kind of hiding in the back for the last 10 minutes of the video, but here's my board of the mysterious cattle deaths. We're about to get to this guy, what specifically is happening here. But then we have the skinwalkers/cryptids that are responsible for maybe killing some of the cattle. This is the Skinwalker Ranch thing that I was talking about. Then we come over here to this guy who's not looking like he's having a great time. This is the upset cult member that I drew. And then here we have a cow. My roommate actually came in, and every once in a while he looks at my whiteboard to see what I'm working on. And he wanted me to tell you guys that this is not the typical cattle that you'll see in any of these cases, that this is a dairy cow, and that I should have drawn a more typical steer or bull or something. So I apologize for that, but I figured for convenience sake, I drew the more typical cow. Up in this corner, we're not going to talk about it, but my brother did draw Freddy Fazbear. So yeah, and of course question marks because this whole thing is a mystery that we're trying to get to the bottom of. Anyway, that's my whiteboard. I might go a little bit further into that. Might draw something else as it comes up for this video, but now the most fantastical explanation towards these cow deaths actually has to do with extraterrestrials, which is a very hard word for me to say, but basically aliens. These aliens are coming down and messing with our cattle, stealing their organs or udders, perhaps even eyes. There's one case that I watched. It was on a Beast Quest episode on the History Channel, specifically their YouTube account, that I did some research for this video, in which mysterious rings occur near where these cattle deaths happen, and some of the soil actually loses all of its nutrients. A cow died, and then nothing would grow near where it died, which was very suspicious and kind of led people to believe that, hey, maybe some alien activity was going on here. I would say that this alien abduction / stealing of organs of the cows is the most popular, followed by the satanic cults explanation. Now, the strongest alien case that was found and highlighted by the History Channel's article was the story of a horse being partially skinned and some of its softer organs being removed, that being like the heart and brain of the horse being completely missing. And then within 24 hours, 3 orange lights were seen in the sky in the area, zipping around, flying at like incredible speeds. AKA, aliens came down, partially skinned this horse, and stole its heart and brain. Maybe. But that's a leading alien theory. And there are more specific alien theories as we talk about the Montana side of these mysterious cattle mutilations. Briefly finishing out this history article, veterinarians are naturally pretty skeptical of anything supernatural happening with these cattle mutilations, having some scientific reasons as to what could be occurring with these cow deaths, such as blood flow ceasing to occur and the blood sinking to the bottom of the corpse, making some of the cattle seem like they had their blood sucked out, as well as some predators going for softer organs because that's just what they prefer and go for first. So these predators are coming in stealing the heart, brain, or eyes because it's what they prefer, it's easier to get at, and that's what they're harvesting. And while I do think that this is pretty good evidence and most cases can probably be explained to natural causes, but every once in a while there is a cow death that seems just a little bit too out of the norm for me to believe that it's just typical natural causes. The history article wraps up by saying that there were some political and legislation events occurring that affected the cattle industry that kind of led to a more mass hysteria, which in turn could have led to more of these reports of out of the ordinary cattle mutilations. It kind of does offer a good explanation as to why reports were higher in the 1970s. Things were more tense and people were more on edge, willing to believe that aliens, cults, skinwalkers, all that stuff was messing with their herd because they were already stressed about the new cattle legislation that was hurting their business. I do, however, kind of think it is, like the FBI's original investigation, kind of convenient to just be like, oh, people were hysterical, okay? Nothing weird was happening. People were just hysterical. If that's kind of the angle you were looking at it for, the History Channel, their news article gives you a solution at the end of their article. New day, and it's time to go over the Distinctly Montana article that was written about these cow mutilations that actually took place in the Big Sky state of Montana. If you notice, I'm wearing a black hoodie now. This is a separate recording. Maybe I've been replaced by a government agent, and I'm gonna feed you fake information to throw you off the course of these cow mutilations. Who's to say? What's cool about this article is it follows a Montana sheriff deputy as he tries to get to the bottom of what's happening with these cattle mutilations. This article also gives specific eyewitness testimonies to crazy supernatural things that are happening around the same time in the 1970s as they're looking into these cattle mutilations that give credit to some of the theories that have been going on all around the US and specific to Montana. Speaking of that, it also ties into the history article that I just read and covered pretty well, with all those theories being brought up in some way in this article too. The article starts out by talking about Cascade County's Sheriff Deputy Keith Wolverton, who is investigating these cattle mutilations. And what really gets the ball rolling is he finds or is called to a scene where he sees a cow that was mutilated. And again, like we talked about in the previous article, incisions were made on it that didn't make any sense. They were too surgical, too fine. Specifically, it's mentioned that the cuts look like they were actually made by pinking shears, which is a shear that is used to cut cloth. I didn't know what that was. I had to look it up, but it's basically just scissors used to cut fabric as opposed to paper. And then from that scene, Wolverton actually sent samples to a veterinarian expert who looked at them and said that the incisions and cut marks, the lacerations, did not line up with a normal predator bite mark or scratch mark, and it also didn't line up with an injury that would occur from rubbing up against wire or something like that, leading these cuts to have some mystery around them, not really making sense. Around a month later, another cattle mutilation was reported, this time near Belt, Montana, where a cow was discovered with half of its face skinned. Its jaw was missing the exterior skin, and it was also missing its tongue and its eye. But its eye wasn't removed through its eye socket. There was a hole above the eye, which something dug the eye out of. This time, instead of there being surgical marks, all the cuts seem to be accompanied by burn marks, which is quite odd. In the article, it specifically references like a laser came and cut the animal. Imagine like a LASIK eye laser, or just, I don't know, a lightsaber. It's not referenced in this specific article, but in other articles I read and videos that I watched on the cattle mutilations, one theory is that lightning was striking herds of cattle and killing them, which sounds crazy and bizarre. Like, how often are cows getting struck by lightning? Apparently enough for it to be a solution to why cattle are getting mutilized. Mutilized? I don't even know if that's a word. Why cows are getting mutilated. So for this specific case, maybe the cow was struck by lightning. That's what the scientific reason for these laser-like burn marks would be on this cow. Another mutilation that occurred was a bull calf, which was found with a silky-like substance all around its dead carcass, which, described in the article, created a cobweb-like effect around this dead animal. Now, the substance was actually tested and sent to a lab, and the lab reported that the substance was petroleum disultate, which again I had to look up, and it seems like petroleum disultate is the least refined version of petroleum and can be found in things like paint and wood protectant. So just a weird substance to find all over a dead cow. Which makes me wonder, where are the Spider-Man accusations? Where are the Minecraft spider allegations? Spiders and cows are both in Minecraft. Maybe one seeped into the real world and got its cobwebs all over a dead cow after we had to slaughter it because our Minecraft hunger meter went down. Nobody's asking stuff like this. No one but me. I'm the only one asking. These mutilation reports got so rampant that in the Teton County of Montana, there were 3 reports in one night of a cow mutilation. And these mutilations had the same MO of sex organs being removed, and this time the incisions were described as C-section-like, which is very unsettling and creepy. Who wants cows to begin C-sections? Not me. Not a fan of that, personally. After all of these unexplainable cases kept popping up in Montana, the Cascade Police Department and Wolverton went to the Great Falls news station. They got newspapers, radio, and TV all to broadcast, asking for any information to help with what the heck is going on with these cattle deaths. The biggest lead that they encountered was actually from a convict that was locked up in prison. And they said that they had news that a Texas cult was coming up into Montana and was responsible for all of these strange mutilations, all of these cows getting cut up, whether it be C-section or mysterious laser. It was all these Texas blood cults. Through a little bit more investigation, the police department gave them polygraph tests, and it turned out that the convict was just lying through his teeth. And there was no real evidence of this Texas cult actually being in the area. Like mentioned earlier in the history section of this video, UFOs or unidentified aircrafts are the most common report for these cattle mutilations, and they played a big role in the Montana mutilations as well. Around the time of 1975, over 130 different UFO sightings were reported in Montana, which sounds like an insane amount. Montana doesn't have the biggest population, especially back in 1970. And throughout the state, 130 UFOs were apparently seen and reported. If you think about it, that's 1/3 of the year. Every third night, there is a UFO in the sky in Montana in 1975. That's just a lot of aliens, guys. That's quite a few. To a lesser degree, people were also reporting seeing these black helicopters, these government aircrafts that seem to be doing some crazy psyops in the area as well. Those were just slightly less reported than the UFOs. But all these sightings combined led a lot of cattle ranchers and locals to start arming up. They were getting absolutely loaded to handle whatever was out there affecting their herd. They were going to blast away anything that was trying to mutilate their cows. The ranchers and people were arming up so much that there was actual concern. Similar cases were reported in Colorado, and a Colorado senator actually called into the FBI stating his concern about people loading up due to these cattle mutilations because they were going to solve the problem themselves. And one of the things that was being cited the most was UFOs and unidentified helicopters, which could be mistaken. You know, a helicopter could be just flying over and people start lining it up. That's probably not the best case scenario if it's, you know, a news helicopter that's mistaken for a government psyop helicopter, for example. So there were legitimate concerns with everyone being so on edge about these cattle mutilations and getting so armed to the teeth. The UFO reports were many and of varying descriptions, some of the UFOs being bigger than 2-story buildings and 400 feet wide, and other UFO sightings being smaller, but it's a group of 6 UFOs at once. So the sightings that people were seeing were very inconsistent, and there was a lot of different UFO activity reported in the area at the time. Other sightings involve creatures, although it's kind of up into the air as to what these creatures are. Some people labeling them as Bigfoot-esque creatures, and other people kind of still going in that alien route. One specific case involved 2 girls in Great Falls as they heard their horses being disturbed in the barn, and when they went to go investigate it, they saw a dark creature that was very imposing. So these young girls that were armed with a gun took aim and shot at it, and then immediately ran back to their house. And as they looked back, they could tell that they wounded the creature, but that wasn't it. There was actually more creatures hiding in the bushes looking at them after they shot the original one. Later that night, the family heard these tortured screams coming from the distance in the thicket that they described as an animal dying, assuming that the beast that they shot earlier was dying in the woods and was producing these horrible screams. This specific story in the Distinctly Montana article was connected to Bigfoot, and if you want to hear more about Bigfoot sightings, I actually just made a video about Theodore Roosevelt's Bigfoot encounter. Kind of. You'll have to watch the video to figure out more, but that's listed somewhere in the corner, and if you just go to my channel, you can watch it. While this article connects these creatures to Bigfoot, they do say that the footprints left on the scene actually had 3 toes instead of 5, which you would think Bigfoot would just have one really big human-like foot, but the footprints left at the scene only had 3, which is an important fact that's going to come up in just a second. The next mysterious sighting took place in Helena, Montana, where a 16-year-old boy looked out the window and saw two creatures, one of them being taller and the other one being shorter in stature. These creatures were meandering outside his house, and eventually, after looking at them for long enough, the taller creature looks back at him, which of course scared the crap out of him, so he ran and got his dad. And by the time his dad looked out the window, the creatures were gone. And originally when I hear this story, it just sounds like, okay, kid was scared, looked outside, it was no biggie. Who's gonna listen to this dumb, scared kid? But when they go outside the next day, they find footprints that contained 3 toes. Again, another weird 3-toed footprint, just like the story of the 2 girls that shot at this mysterious creature. And while the article brought up Bigfoot, I think that this ties more into like alien encounters, like aliens coming down and looking around people's houses and killing their cows or skinning their horses. That makes more sense than like a Bigfoot, because when I think of Bigfoot, I don't think of a herd of animals hanging out. You know, a short animal and a big animal, and you know, we're all Bigfoot hanging out. I think of just one lone creature stalking in the woods. Soon after those last more fantastical reports came in, the cow mutilations and alien reports really died down in Montana and throughout the US in general, leaving us to ask the question, why was it so prevalent and widespread during this time in America culture? These cow mutilations still exist and have existed a long time before the 1970s, but for whatever reason, it was a peak era back in around 1975. With the reports dying down, the investigations naturally kind of fizzled out as well, and we never got to the point where the FBI was looking into them to the degree that they were. Overall, the 1970s cow mutilations are far from normal, and my favorite aspect of looking into this case and making this video is how many different angles people have and how different areas of the US saw different reasons as to why these cattle are dying in such mysterious ways. Things like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, where beasts were seen the nights that these cattle died and were mutilated, and then going into other rural parts of the US, and all these UFO sightings are happening the same night that the cows are being killed and cut up in odd ways that don't make sense to the laws of nature. And then there's the craziness of a blood cult sneaking in around the West, killing all these cattle in different states, and even convicts making up stories in Montana about how some Texas cults are coming in and killing these cows. I love how everyone has a different reason as to why they're happening, but then these reasons pop up in different areas at the same time. It just makes it a much more rich mystery, as there's like multiple answers to the question of why are these cow mutilations happening? What is the bottom of this? Personally, I think that the majority of these cases actually involve some normal cow deaths with some slightly strange or odd circumstances, but there is the weird case that comes up every now and then where a weird cobweb substance is surrounding the cow as if Spider-Man came in and shot it with his webs, and the substance is actually petroleum something or other. That's just weird. There's also the cases where the soil around the cow dies and loses all of its nutrients. That's odd. That doesn't really make any sense. Also, the cuts being so fine and so irregular for predators really does raise an eyebrow. I'm not saying that I fully subscribe to the belief that these cow mutilations are supernatural. I'm just saying that at least one of these cows was used in a blood cult sacrifice. At least one of them. You know, there's a lot of weird stuff happening in the 70s, and a lot of cows died, and a lot of weird cuts were happening to these dead cows. At least one person dressed in all black came in and used the cow's organs for something. Can you admit that one of these cows died to a Texas blood cult? Can we just say one of them? I think we can. I think we can say one. And then there's also the cow that had like burn marks. We can say that cow got struck by lightning. I think that's a pretty good, weird solution. Like, it's weird. Like, a cow got struck by lightning and died. That's kind of crazy. You know, there is that classic saying where if you roll the dice enough times, a cow is going to get struck by lightning. You haven't heard that one? Really? You haven't heard that one? Well, clearly you haven't looked into the mysterious cow mutilations of the 1970s before. Overall, what do you guys think? What do you think is the most prevailing answer as to why these cattle were dying? Do you believe the super realistic explanation of this is just normal deaths and people were just a little bit more hysteric in the 1970s? Or are you like me where you think that most of the deaths are normal and every once in a while there's a suspicious one that we don't have the answer to? Or do you believe that there is something else going on, whether it be cults, aliens, Bigfoot, cryptid, skinwalker creatures? I'm curious as to what you guys believe because I know that there are a lot of suspicious things going on and a lot of different reasons as to why these cows are getting mutilated. And there you have it, the conclusion to the cattle mutilations on Montana After Midnight. I hope you guys did enjoy this episode. It really means a lot that you stuck around to the end of the video. If you like this one, I'm sure you're going to like one of the other videos that were done previously. This whole YouTube channel started as a class project that I've just kept going, and the goal was to make 5 pieces of content, and this is the 5th. Of course, I'm going to keep it going. I got some interesting ideas to cover in the future, but I'm at 50 subscribers, and if you like this, make sure to stick around because who knows where this will take us. Anyway, if you want some behind the scenes stuff, make sure to follow my Instagram. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and like the video. And if you've been following along, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.